I'm Ariana, 29 female. I live in a small apartment that's just big enough for me and my rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Buster. By profession, I'm an ER nurse, a job that's equal parts chaos and deep, humbling reward. It's a life built on controlled urgency and putting others first, which until recently I thought was a value my family shared. This is the story of how I discovered that the people who were supposed to be my safe harbor were the ones creating the storm. All for the sake of a picture-perfect Christmas I wasn't invited to. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The lead up to this particular Christmas felt different. Usually, by December 1st, my mother, Brenda, would have already transformed our family group chat into a military-grade operation command center. Brenda was an event planner, and she treated family holidays like the Met Gala. Timetables would be issued for baking gingerbread cookies. A color-coordinated dress code for Christmas Eve dinner would be announced. My sister, Chloe, a social media influencer whose life was a curated reel of aesthetic perfection, would be assigned the task of ambience, which meant a lot of beige candles and artfully draped faux fur blankets. My dad, Robert, a librarian and the quiet anchor in our family's often turbulent sea, would be in charge of the music, a task he took seriously, crafting playlists that could rival a Hollywood film score. My job was usually relegated to the practical, picking up last-minute groceries, making sure the first aid kit was stocked for any culinary mishaps, and, more often than not, working a shift on Christmas Day itself. This year, however, there was radio silence. The group chat, usually buzzing with exclamation points and festive emojis, was dormant. When I called my mom in early December to ask about plans, her voice was strangely subdued. "Oh, honey, I just don't think we have the energy for a big to-do this year," she'd said, a sigh punctuating her sentence. "Your father's been feeling a bit run down, and with my workload, it just feels like too much. I think we're just going to have a quiet one at home." Just the four of us, very low-key. It was so out of character that I was immediately concerned. "Is Dad okay?" I asked, my nurse brain kicking into high gear. "Does he need to see a doctor? I can check his vitals when I'm over next." "No, nothing like that," she'd rushed to say. "He's just tired. We all are. A quiet Christmas is just what the doctor ordered." I felt a pang of disappointment, but also a wave of understanding. My parents weren't getting any younger, and the holidays could be exhausting. I suggested a potluck to make things easier, or even ordering a catered meal. Each suggestion was politely but firmly shut down. "No, sweetheart, we really just want to relax. No fuss." Chloe echoed the sentiment. I texted her separately, asking if everything was really all right. Her reply was a brief, almost dismissive text. "Mom's right, Ari. We're all burnt out. A chill Christmas sounds perfect. Don't overthink it." "Don't overthink it" was Chloe's standard response to any of my genuine concerns. To her, my analytical nature was a design flaw. So I accepted it. I even felt a little relieved. My schedule at the hospital was brutal, and the thought of not having to rush from a 12-hour shift to a meticulously planned family event was appealing. I picked up a Christmas Eve shift and a Christmas Day shift, telling my supervisor that my family was keeping things small and wouldn't mind. It felt noble, in a way, to let another nurse with young kids have the day off. My family would be home, I could see them on Boxing Day, and we'd exchange gifts then. It was practical, it was mature. A week before Christmas, I dropped off their presents. The house was calm, almost eerily so. There were a few decorations up, but not the usual explosion of festive cheer. Dad gave me a warm hug but seemed distracted, his eyes darting towards my mom every time I asked a question. Brenda fussed over me, packing up a container of cookies she'd supposedly baked, though they looked suspiciously store-bought. "Now, don't you worry about us," she said, ushering me toward the door. "You just focus on your important work at the hospital. We're so proud of you for helping people on the holiday." It was a classic Brenda move, framing something to her benefit while making it sound like a compliment to me. I tried calling them on Christmas Eve morning just to wish them well before I headed into my long shift. The call went straight to voicemail. I sent a text to the group chat. "Merry Christmas Eve, everyone. Hope you have a cozy day. Thinking of you all. Love you." Hours passed, and my phone remained silent. I checked it between seeing patients, the lack of a simple "you too," or a heart emoji feeling like a small, cold stone in my gut. I told myself they were just unplugging, embracing their quiet Christmas to the fullest. They were probably watching old movies and had turned their phones off. It was logical. It made sense. Working in the ER on Christmas is a unique experience. You see the full spectrum of human life in a compressed 24-hour period. There are moments of profound sadness, but there are also moments of incredible kindness. A local restaurant dropped off a massive dinner for the staff. A patient's family brought us a box of chocolates. We played carols softly at the nurse's station. Despite the chaos, there was a sense of camaraderie, a shared purpose that felt like its own kind of family. I pushed the silence from my real family to the back of my mind and focused on the tasks at hand. I held the hand of an elderly man who had no visitors. I helped a new mother who was terrified her baby had a fever. I was needed here. I was useful. And that feeling almost filled the void that was beginning to form. Almost. I left the hospital late on Christmas Day, exhausted but content, looking forward to sleeping in and then driving over to my parents' house the next day for a belated celebration. The quiet Christmas would be over, and whatever strange mood had taken over my family would surely have passed. I had no idea that the quiet was not a mood. It was a choice. And the silence I was experiencing was the sound of a door being deliberately and quietly closed in my face. Boxing Day morning arrived with a thin layer of frost on my apartment window. I woke up feeling a pleasant sort of exhaustion, the kind that comes after a long, meaningful stretch of work. Buster was curled at the foot of my bed, his tail giving a lazy thump-thump-thump against the mattress. I smiled, stretched, and finally reached for my phone, expecting to see a flurry of belated Christmas messages from my family. Maybe a picture of them in matching pajamas my mom had bought, or a photo of Dad's famously lopsided Christmas tree. Instead, there was nothing, no missed calls, no new messages in the group chat. The last thing was still my "Merry Christmas Eve" text sitting there unanswered. The cold stone in my gut from the day before returned, heavier this time. It was past 10 a.m. even on a lazy holiday. My mom was an early riser. It was bizarre. I decided to give them a call before I got in the shower. I dialed my mom's number, straight to voicemail. I tried my dad. Voicemail. Chloe's phone rang and rang before clicking over to her cheerful, pre-recorded message. "Hey, you've reached Chloe. Leave a message and make it fabulous." A prickle of real worry started to creep up my spine. This was beyond a quiet Christmas. What if something had happened? What if Dad's fatigue wasn't just fatigue? My mind, trained to jump to worst-case scenarios, started cycling through a list of medical emergencies. I threw on a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, my plans of a lazy morning evaporating. I'd just drive over. It was a 40-minute trip, but I had to see for myself that they were okay. I wouldn't even be mad that they hadn't answered. I'd just be relieved. While my coffee brewed, I scrolled through my social media feeds out of habit, my thumb swiping past photos of other people's happy Christmas mornings. There were families in matching onesies, kids tearing open presents, tables groaning with food. It all felt a million miles away from my silent apartment, and that's when I saw it. It wasn't a post from my sister, Chloe. She was smart enough, or perhaps callous enough, to have blocked me from seeing her stories if she was posting something she didn't want me to see. No, this was from our cousin, Jenna. Jenna was my aunt's daughter, a sweet but slightly naive 25-year-old who was still in the phase of documenting every single moment of her life online. Her post was a photo collage, bright and cheerful, set to a popular, upbeat Christmas song. The first photo was a group shot. My mother, Brenda, was in the center, beaming, wearing a stylish cream-colored ski jacket. My father, Robert, was beside her, a goofy grin on his face, a pair of ski goggles pushed up on his forehead. And there was Chloe, my sister, one arm slung around my mom, the other holding a mug of what looked like hot chocolate, her influencer smile perfectly in place. They were standing in front of a massive stone fireplace, a roaring fire blazing behind them. The background wasn't my parents' familiar living room. It was a rustic, luxurious ski lodge. Standing with them were my aunt, my uncle, and Jenna herself, all bundled up in expensive-looking ski gear. The caption was sickeningly cheerful. "Best Christmas surprise ever. So glad the whole fam could make it to Aspen this year. Snowflake skier." The snowflake emoji seemed to mock me from the screen. My breath caught in my chest. I clicked on Jenna's profile, my fingers feeling clumsy and numb. Her stories were a goldmine of evidence. A video of them all laughing on a ski lift, the snow-covered mountains of Aspen stretching out behind them. A boomerang of Chloe and Jenna clinking mugs of mulled wine. A photo of my dad and uncle attempting to build a snowman, my mom directing them from the porch of a stunning rental cabin. They looked happy, relaxed, full of life. They looked like a family enjoying a beautiful, expensive, and meticulously planned vacation. A vacation they had told me wasn't happening. A vacation they had built on a foundation of lies about being tired and wanting a quiet Christmas at home. I sank onto my kitchen stool, the phone still clutched in my hand. The coffee maker gurgled, finishing its cycle, the sound deafeningly loud in the sudden, crushing silence of my apartment. It all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. The vague excuses, the dodged calls, the lack of decorations, the pride in my important work that would keep me conveniently occupied and out of the way. They hadn't just gone on a trip without me. They had actively conspired to deceive me. They had constructed a lie, maintained it for weeks, and then left me to work through the loneliest days of the year under the false belief that they were just at home, resting. My worry for their safety curdled into a hot, bitter feeling in my throat. It wasn't concern anymore, it was rage. It was a profound, soul-deep hurt that felt like a physical blow. Why? Why lie? If they wanted to go on a trip without me, why not just say so? Did they think I would throw a tantrum? Beg to come? I was an adult. I could handle disappointment. But I couldn't handle deceit. I couldn't handle being treated like an inconvenience, a problem to be managed and lied to. I thought about my Christmas Eve, holding a patient's hand, feeling a sense of purpose. I thought about the pride I felt in giving up my holiday for a colleague. All of it had been predicated on a lie. My sacrifice hadn't been for my family's quiet rest. It had been to facilitate their lavish vacation. I wasn't the dutiful daughter. I was the fool they had easily tricked. I stood up, my movements stiff. I walked over to the coffee maker and poured the fresh, hot coffee directly down the drain, watching the dark liquid swirl away. I wasn't going to their house. There was no one there. The hollow silence I'd been trying to ignore for 2 days wasn't just in my head. It was real. It was the sound of an empty house, an empty promise, and an empty space in my family where I was supposed to be. And in that moment, the hurt began to crystallize into something else. Something harder, colder, and much, much clearer. Resolve. The drive to my parents' house was an out-of-body experience. I don't remember much of the traffic or the route I'd taken 1,000 times. My mind was a maelstrom of screenshots from Jenna's social media, replaying on a loop. My mom's triumphant smile. My dad's complicit grin. Chloe's casual, carefree pose. Every happy image was a fresh stab of betrayal. What had been their logic? Had they sat around the dinner table planning this deception? Who had proposed the lie? Had any of them, even for a second, felt a flicker of guilt? My initial plan was simply to confirm it, to see the empty driveway and the dark windows for myself. It felt like a necessary step to prove I wasn't crazy, that what I saw on a tiny screen was real. As I turned onto their quiet suburban street, my heart hammered against my ribs, and there it was. My dad's sedan was gone. My mom's SUV was missing. The house, usually aglow with Christmas lights by now, was completely dark, save for the motion sensor security light that flickered on as my car pulled up to the curb. It looked deserted, unwelcoming. I parked and got out, the cold December air biting at my cheeks. I walked up the stone pathway, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. I had a key, of course, for emergencies. This, I decided, qualified as an emergency of the soul. My hand trembled as I slid the key into the lock. The click of the deadbolt turning felt like a gunshot in the silence. I pushed the door open and was met with a wall of cold, stale air. The house was silent. Not the peaceful silence of a sleeping home, but the dead, empty silence of a place that has been abandoned. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and foreign in the space. The only answer was the hum of the refrigerator. I flipped on the light in the foyer. Everything was neat, tidy, and sterile. There were no coats slung over the banister, no shoes kicked off by the door. On the small table where they usually dropped the mail, there was a neat pile addressed to them, postmarked from the last few days. I walked into the living room. The pathetic, sparsely decorated tree we'd seen when I dropped off the gift stood in the corner, its lights off. The cushions on the sofa were perfectly plumped, with no indentations from where people had been sitting. I continued my tour of the house like a ghost, drifting from room to room. In the kitchen, the counters were spotless. I opened the fridge. It was nearly empty, save for a few condiments and a carton of milk that was likely expired. There were no Christmas leftovers, no half-eaten cheesecakes or containers of turkey, just emptiness. I went upstairs. My parents' bed was made with hotel-like precision. Their closets were orderly, but I could see the gaps where suitcases would have been taken, where bulky ski jackets and winter boots were missing. Then I went into Chloe's old room, which she still used when she stayed over. It was pristine, as always, but on her nightstand I saw a small piece of paper. It was a packing list. My eyes scanned the neatly written words: ski pants, goggles, thermal underwear, sunscreen, passport. Passport? Why would they need a passport for Aspen, unless they weren't in Aspen? Unless Aspen was just the convenient, generic location mentioned in a social media post. Maybe the trip was even bigger than I imagined. The lie felt deeper, more complex. I walked back downstairs, the reality of the situation settling in like a physical weight. They had planned this for weeks, maybe months. They had cleaned the house, packed their bags, and walked out the door, leaving behind a perfectly staged scene of a quiet holiday at home. They had turned off their phones, or at least muted the family group chat, to avoid any pesky interruptions from the daughter they had left behind. I sat down on the perfectly plumped sofa, the one that offered no comfort, and I finally let myself break. The rage subsided, replaced by a tidal wave of grief. I cried. I cried for the Christmases we'd had, the ones filled with genuine laughter and warmth, which now felt tainted. I cried for the little girl inside me who believed her family was her anchor. I cried for the woman I was now, who had been so callously discarded. How could they do this? I had spent my entire life trying to be the easy child. Chloe was the star, charismatic, beautiful, and demanding. I was the responsible one, steady, reliable, and low maintenance. I had always thought that my reliability was appreciated, valued. Now I saw it for what it was, a convenience. I was so reliable that they knew I wouldn't cause a scene. I was so low maintenance that they could pack me away with the Christmas decorations, confident I would be right where they left me when they returned. As my tears subsided, a cold clarity washed over me. The grief was still there, but it was now joined by a hardened resolve. They had wanted silence. They had created a void where a family Christmas was supposed to be. Fine, I would give them silence. I would give them a void so complete they would eventually have to acknowledge what they had thrown into it. I stood up and walked through the house one last time. I took out my phone and took a few pictures. The empty fridge. The tidy, unused living room. The packing list on Chloe's nightstand. I wasn't sure what I would do with them yet, but they were my proof, my evidence of the lie. I walked out of the house, locking the door behind me. The security light switched off, plunging the house back into darkness. It looked like a tomb. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The echoes in that empty house were no longer just sounds of absence. They were the starting pistol for a race they didn't even know I was running. The days between Christmas and New Year's Eve were a blur of calculated numbness. I went back to work, throwing myself into the relentless pace of the ER. The controlled chaos was a welcome distraction, a place where problems were identifiable and solutions, while not always easy, were at least tangible. A cut could be stitched, a fever could be brought down, a bone could be set. A shattered sense of family, however, was a wound I had no idea how to treat. During my off hours, I became a reluctant detective. My grief had receded just enough to allow a cold, methodical anger to take its place. I needed to understand the full scope of the lie. It wasn't just about the trip itself anymore, it was about the depth of the deception. Jenna's social media had been the initial spark, but I knew my sister. Chloe's digital footprint was vast and curated, but she wasn't infallible. She might have blocked me, but social media is a web of connections, and I was determined to pull on every thread. I started with the basics. I created a new, anonymous social media account. No profile picture, a generic name, 0 followers. From this ghost account, I navigated to Chloe's public influencer page. Of course, she hadn't posted anything since before Christmas. Part of her lie would be maintaining digital silence to her wider audience to avoid a stray comment like, "Hope you're having a great time in the snow," that a mutual acquaintance might see and mention to me. She was a professional at managing her image. But she had tagged photographers, makeup artists, and brands in her older posts. I began to follow them, and then I followed the people who frequently commented on their posts. It was tedious work, a slow descent into the rabbit hole of influencer culture. I started looking at the followers of the luxury ski resort in Aspen that Jenna had tagged. I spent hours scrolling through a sea of faces and vacation photos. Nothing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Jenna, in her happy-go-lucky posting spree, had tagged not only the resort but also a small, local restaurant in Aspen where they'd apparently had dinner. The restaurant's page was filled with photos of their rustic decor and mouth-watering food, and like many businesses, they frequently reposted photos their customers had taken. I scrolled through their tagged photos, going back day by day, and there it was, dated December 24th. A picture reposted by the restaurant, originally taken by a user I didn't recognize. The photo was of a large group of people, all bundled up and laughing around an outdoor fire pit. And in the background, unmistakable, was my family. Chloe, Brenda, Robert, my aunt and uncle, and Jenna. My sister had her back mostly to the camera, but her expensive, cream-colored coat was identical to the one in Jenna's post. My mother was laughing, her head thrown back. The user who had originally posted it had a public profile. I clicked on it. Her name was Candace, and her bio described her as a lifestyle blogger and travel enthusiast. Her feed was a glossy magazine of exotic locations and sponsored content. She was one of Chloe's influencer friends. I scanned her recent posts. There were several from Aspen. One was a picture of her and another woman captioned, "So amazing to reconnect with my girl at Chloe Creative in the most magical winter wonderland." Chloe had even liked the post. From her real account, it was a slip-up, a tiny crack in her carefully constructed wall of silence. She must have been scrolling late at night, feeling safe and anonymous, and double-tapped without thinking. But the biggest piece of evidence came from Candace's stories. Unlike Jenna's innocent family vacation posts, Candace's were all about networking and brand partnerships. In one video, she was panning across a room of people at what she called a brand winter summit. And as the camera moved, it passed a table where my mother, Brenda, was deep in conversation with a man wearing a lanyard with a corporate logo. The audio was faint, but I could hear snippets of their conversation over the background music. Brenda was talking about destination event planning and leveraging influencer marketing for luxury experiences. Suddenly, the passport on Chloe's packing list made sense. This wasn't just a family ski trip. This was a work trip, a networking event for Chloe, and a business development opportunity for my mother. They had combined a family vacation with a professional junket, and I, the ER nurse with the messy, unpredictable schedule and the complete lack of social media clout, simply didn't fit into the picture. I wasn't useful for their brand. My presence would have required an explanation that they weren't prepared to give. It would have meant either paying for an extra person or explaining to their contacts why one daughter was there and the other wasn't. So, they had chosen the path of least resistance. Eliminate the variable. Lie to Ariana. The confirmation didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. I wasn't just left out of a vacation, I was deemed irrelevant to their professional and social ambitions. My father, the quiet librarian, had been dragged along, and my aunt, uncle, and cousin were used as social cover, making it look like a wholesome family affair. I took a screenshot of everything: the photo from the restaurant, the post from Chloe's friend, the video of my mother networking. I saved them all to a secure folder, a digital dossier of my family's betrayal. The breadcrumbs had led to a truth far uglier than I had imagined. And now that I had the full picture, I knew that a simple, tearful confrontation wouldn't be enough. My response needed to be as carefully planned and executed as their deception. They had wanted silence and a curated image. I decided I would give them exactly that, just not in the way they expected. The return of my family was as quiet as their departure. I received a text in the group chat on December 30th from my mother. It was bright, cheerful, and utterly infuriating. "We're back, so refreshed after a few quiet days at home. Can't wait to see you for New Year's. Are you free tomorrow night? We can finally exchange gifts." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every fiber of my being wanted to unleash the torrent of anger and hurt that had been brewing inside me. I wanted to send the screenshots, the evidence, the accusations. I wanted to demand an explanation, but I knew it would be a mistake. A messy, emotional confrontation was what they would expect, and they would be prepared for it. Brenda would turn on the waterworks, claiming it was a last-minute decision and they didn't want to bother me while I was so busy at work. Chloe would dismiss me as being dramatic. My dad would stand by silently, looking uncomfortable but offering no support. I would be painted as the overly sensitive, ungrateful daughter who couldn't just be happy for them. No, my response couldn't be a flash flood. It had to be a slow, rising tide. So I began Operation Silent Night. My first move was to respond to the text. I waited a few hours to make it seem like I was busy, then sent a simple, breezy message back. "So glad you're feeling rested. I'd love to, but I'm actually going to be out of town for New Year's. A few friends and I planned a last-minute cabin getaway. Let's catch up sometime next week." The lie felt surprisingly easy on my fingertips. I had no such plans. My only plan was to spend New Year's Eve with Buster, a pizza, and my righteous indignation. But my text served two purposes. It mirrored their own last-minute excuse, and it established a new boundary. I was no longer waiting by the phone for them. I had a life they were not privy to. My mother's reply came almost instantly. "Oh, that sounds lovely, honey. Have fun. Stay safe." The exclamation points felt forced, and I could almost taste her surprise. I had never, in my 29 years, made spontaneous New Year's plans that didn't involve them. The next phase of the operation was to create the illusion of my wonderful getaway. I spent New Year's Eve at home, but my social media told a different story. I had a friend who had gone to a cabin in the mountains a few weeks prior and had taken some beautiful, generic photos of a snowy landscape, a fireplace, and a cup of hot cocoa held in mittened hands. She was a good friend, one who knew the broad strokes of my family's recent betrayal and was more than happy to help. With her permission, I posted a few of her photos to my rarely used Instagram story. I didn't tag a location or show any faces. The caption was simple: "Much needed escape. Happy New Year, everyone." It was the kind of vague, aesthetic post Chloe would make. It was bait, and I knew she, if no one else, would see it. She wouldn't be able to resist checking up on the life I was suddenly living without her. The next week, my mom called, her voice laced with a performative casualness. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your trip? We missed you, but it sounds like you had a great time." "It was amazing," I said, my voice even and calm. "So relaxing. Just what I needed after the holiday rush at work." I didn't offer any more details, and the silence that followed was filled with her unspoken questions. I let a week pass, then another. I didn't call them. I didn't text the group chat. When my dad sent me a text asking how I was, I waited a day to reply with a simple, "Doing great, Dad. Hope you are too." I was polite but distant. I was a placid lake, and they had no idea what was happening beneath the surface. My silence was starting to make them uncomfortable. It wasn't the angry, yelling silence they could easily dismiss as a tantrum. It was a cheerful, busy, self-sufficient silence. It was the silence of someone who didn't need them. The final piece of my plan was about setting a new precedent for my life, one that was not built around their convenience. I had a small nest egg saved up, money I had been carefully putting aside for a down payment on a condo. I decided to use a small portion of it. I went online and booked a trip. A real one for me. It was a 10-day tour of national parks out west, something I had always dreamed of doing but had never made time for. I scheduled it for late spring, a time when the weather would be beautiful. I didn't tell my family about it. Instead, I told my manager at the hospital. I submitted my time-off request and it was approved. I began quietly preparing, buying hiking boots and a new backpack. This trip wasn't for revenge. It was for me. It was the first step in building a life where my own joy was the priority. The revenge was a secondary benefit, a consequence of my own self-care. Operation Silent Night wasn't about a big, dramatic explosion. It was about quietly diffusing the bomb they had placed in the center of my life. It was about showing them that their power over me came from my willingness to be available, to be the reliable one, to be the one left behind. By simply removing myself from that equation, I was taking back control. I was letting their calls go to voicemail. I was letting their texts sit unread for a day. I was filling my life with my own plans, my own joys. The silence they had created for their Christmas vacation was now a silence of their own making, and it was growing louder in their ears with every passing day. They had expected tears and anger. They had no idea how to handle my happiness. The weeks of my polite, cheerful silence did exactly what I had hoped they would. It unnerved them. Specifically, it unnerved my mother. Brenda was a planner, a controller. She operated from a script, and I had gone off book. My lack of neediness, my sudden and unexplained social life, and my placid refusal to engage on anything but a surface level created a vacuum. And Brenda, being Brenda, could not resist trying to fill it. Her opportunity came in the form of my birthday, which falls in late January. Typically, my birthday celebration was a family dinner planned by her, held at her house or a restaurant of her choosing. This year, I preempted her. 2 weeks before my birthday, I sent a message to the group chat. Hey everyone, for my 30th this year, I'm going to do something a little different. I've booked a weekend trip to the coast with some friends, so no need to plan anything. Looking forward to celebrating with you all when I get back. Once again, I had no such trip booked. My real plan was to spend my birthday weekend volunteering at an animal shelter's adoption event, something I'd wanted to do for ages. The lie was a strategic tool, a way to control the narrative and force a confrontation on my own terms. The response was immediate. My mom called me within minutes. Ariana, what is this? A trip for your birthday? You always celebrate with us. It's a tradition. Well, 30 feels like a good time to start some new traditions, I said calmly. But with friends, who are these friends? You never mentioned a trip. Her voice was a mixture of confusion and accusation. It was a bit of a last-minute thing, you know how it is, I said, throwing her own words back at her. Don't worry, we'll celebrate when I get back. How about dinner at my place the week after? I can cook. I had them. By inviting them into my space, on my terms, I was setting the stage. She reluctantly agreed, unable to find a logical reason to refuse without sounding controlling. The night of the dinner, I was a bundle of nerves, but I channeled it into preparation. I made a lasagna, a salad, and picked up a nice cake. I set my small dining table. It was my territory. They would have no choice but to face me here. They arrived precisely on time, bearing gifts wrapped in expensive paper. My dad, Robert, gave me a hug that felt genuinely warm, though his eyes were filled with a sort of sad apprehension. Chloe swept in, air-kissing my cheek and immediately scanning my apartment for things to silently judge. Brenda entered like a queen surveying a new territory, her smile plastered on, but her eyes sharp and calculating. We made it through the small talk. They asked about my fictitious trip, and I gave them vague, pleasant answers. I asked about their work, and they gave me their standard, polished replies. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, after we had finished the lasagna and I was clearing the plates, Brenda put her fork down with a decisive click. Ariana, she began, her tone shifting from pleasantries to business. We need to talk. You've been very distant lately. We're worried about you. I stopped, plates in hand, and looked at her. Distant? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I'm not sure what you mean. I've just been busy. It's more than busy, Chloe chimed in, leaning forward. It's like you're a different person. You're being secretive. All these last-minute trips. It's not like you. This was it, the opening I had been waiting for. I put the plates down on the counter and turned to face them, leaning back against it. I crossed my arms. You want to talk about secrets? I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of the past month. Okay, let's talk about secrets. How was Aspen? The reaction was instantaneous and profound. My mother's face went pale. Chloe's jaw tightened and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. My father just sighed, a deep, weary sound, and looked down at his hands. I don't know what you mean, Brenda stammered, but her eyes betrayed her. Don't you? I walked over to my laptop, which I had placed on the sideboard. I opened it and turned the screen towards them. The first image I brought up was the screenshot of Jenna's post, the happy family in the ski lodge. Jenna posted this on Christmas morning. While I was getting ready for a 12-hour shift, you encouraged me to take so I could help people on the holiday. While I was under the impression you were all at home, too tired for a celebration. I clicked to the next picture. The one from the restaurant's tagged photos with them in the background. Then the post from Chloe's influencer friend, Candace, mentioning their reconnection. And finally, the crown jewel, the screenshot from the video of my mother, networking at the Brand Winter Summit. This wasn't just a family vacation, was it? I continued. My voice gaining strength. This was a work trip for you and Chloe, a networking event, and I wasn't invited because I'm not part of the brand. I'm just the boring nurse daughter. The reliable one you knew you could lie to without any fuss. You knew I'd cover shifts, that I'd believe your pathetic story about being tired. You didn't just exclude me, you used my sense of duty against me. Silence, thick, suffocating silence. Brenda finally found her voice, but it was weak. Honey, it wasn't like that. It all came together so quickly, we were going to tell you. Stop, my voice was sharp, cutting her off. Stop lying. I found Chloe's packing list. You planned this for weeks. You packed, you cleaned the house, and you left, turning your phones off so you wouldn't have to deal with me. The worst part, the part I can't get over, isn't that you went on a trip. It's that you didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth. You treated me like a child, like an obstacle. You smiled to my face and congratulated me for my sacrifice while you were planning to profit from it. I finally looked at my dad. And you, I said, my voice softening with the deep sting of his betrayal. You just went along with it, not a word. He looked up, his eyes filled with tears. Ari, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I told them it was wrong, but he trailed off, gesturing helplessly towards my mother. Chloe finally spoke, her voice defensive. Oh my God, Ariana, would you just get over it? It was a trip. We're sorry we lied, okay? But you're being so dramatic. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The last thread of hope that they might understand, that they might feel genuine remorse, just broke. Dramatic, I let out a short, bitter laugh. No, Chloe, I'm not being dramatic, I'm being done. I walked over to the table and picked up the cake box. I think this dinner is over. You came here because my silence made you uncomfortable. Well, I have a revelation for you. This is the new normal. The polite calls, the group chat, the forced holiday traditions, it's over. You wanted a picture-perfect family for your brand summit? You can have it, but I won't be in the picture. I opened my apartment door. Please leave. They were stunned into silence. For once in her life, my mother had no script, no plan. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. My dad stood up slowly, his face etched with regret. Chloe, ever defiant, grabbed her purse and stormed out without another word. My mother followed, a strange, lost look on her face. My dad was the last to leave. He paused in the doorway. I really am sorry, Ari, he said again, his voice thick with emotion. I know, Dad, I said, and the sad part was I believed him, but it wasn't enough. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it, the adrenaline finally leaving my body, leaving me trembling. It wasn't a triumphant victory. It was just a heartbreaking, necessary amputation. The aftermath of the confrontation was exactly what I expected it to be, silent. But this time, it was a silence of my own choosing. There were no more forced cheerfulness texts from my mom, no more passive-aggressive group chat messages. Chloe blocked me on all social media, an act so childish it was almost comical. The only communication was a single, long email from my dad a few days later. He didn't make excuses for my mom or sister. He just apologized, fully and without reservation, for his own weakness, for his failure to stand up for me. He wrote about how the family dynamics had been set for decades, Brenda planning, Chloe performing, and me accommodating, and how he had been too passive to challenge them. He ended it by saying he loved me and would understand if I needed space, but he hoped that one day we could find a way to have a relationship, just the two of us. I read his email several times. It was the first genuine, honest communication I'd received from any of them. I replied with a simple, "Thank you for the email, Dad. I need some time." The weeks that followed were strange. There was a void where my family used to be, a space in my schedule and my mind that had always been occupied by their needs, their drama, their expectations. At first, it felt unnervingly empty. I had to consciously stop myself from checking the family group chat that I had since muted and archived. But slowly, I began to fill that void with my own life. I went all in on volunteering at the animal shelter. I found a deep sense of peace in caring for creatures who gave nothing but unconditional love in return. My fake birthday plans became real. I spent the day helping a litter of puppies get adopted, and my heart felt fuller than it ever had after one of my mother's forced family dinners. I reconnected with old friends, the ones who had fallen by the wayside because I was always busy with family. We had long, lazy brunches and went on hikes. I was building a community based on mutual respect. Genuine affection, not obligation. When spring arrived, I took my trip out west. For 10 days, I was completely untethered. I hiked through Zion National Park until my legs ached. I watched the sun rise over the Grand Canyon, feeling profoundly small and incredibly peaceful. I drove through vast, open landscapes with my windows down and music blasting. For the first time in my life, I wasn't anyone's daughter or anyone's sister. I was just Ariana. I sent my dad a single picture, a photo of me, smiling and genuinely happy, standing at a viewpoint overlooking a stunning canyon. He replied with a simple heart emoji. It was a start. Upon my return, I felt different. The anger and hurt had mostly faded, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and a newfound self-assurance. I had faced the ugly truth about my family and survived. More than that, I was thriving. My life was smaller in some ways, but it was also infinitely more authentic. One day, about 6 months after the disastrous dinner, I ran into my cousin Jenna at a coffee shop. She visibly flinched when she saw me, her expression a mixture of guilt and panic. "Ariana, hi," she said, her voice a little too high. "Hey, Jenna," I said, giving her a small, genuine smile. There was no point in being angry with her. She had been a pawn, and her naivety had inadvertently set me free. "Look, I am so sorry about, she stammered. "I had no idea they hadn't told you. When my mom found out, she was furious with your mom. It caused a huge fight." "It's okay, Jenna. You didn't know. Honestly, you did me a favor." She looked confused. "I did." "Yes," I said, stirring my coffee. "You showed me the truth, and it's much better to build your life on a hard truth than a comfortable lie." We chatted for a few more minutes, and it was normal. The world hadn't ended. The family hadn't imploded, though I heard through Jenna that things were still tense between my parents. I still have a relationship with my dad. It's quieter now, built on one-on-one lunches and phone calls. We don't talk about my mom or Chloe. We talk about books he's read, about my work, about Buster. It's a fragile thing, but it's real. I have not spoken to my mother or my sister since that night. I see Chloe's sponsored posts pop up on my feed sometimes, a ghost from another life, selling a perfect existence that I know is anything but. I don't feel anger when I see her face anymore. I mostly just feel a distant sort of pity. They got what they wanted. They have their curated world, their brand, their image, but I got something so much better. I got myself back. My home is no longer just an apartment, it's a sanctuary. My holidays are no longer about obligation, they're about joy, whether it's spent with friends, with my dog, or quietly by myself. They went looking for a picture-perfect moment in the snow, and in their absence, I found my own fireside. It's smaller and it's quieter, but the warmth is real, and it's all mine.